Hello and welcome back, I should say, to the Progressive Bitcoiner podcast. We are indeed back with new episodes of the podcast coming soon. It's been 6 months since the podcast's last episode, and since then, founder and former host Mark Stefani has taken a step back and will now serve as advisor and guest to the podcast. I intend to carry forward the spirit in which Mark began the podcast, which you can hear in his own words in episode 1. I'm your new host, Trey Walsh, fervent progressive and Bitcoin advocate with almost a decade of experience in nonprofits, running programs and working with folks with disabilities and disadvantaged youth. Now, I initially became interested in Bitcoin because of its unique ability to promote human rights and social justice qualities, and I've spent the last 2 years advocating for increased adoption, especially amongst people who hold progressive and left-leaning independent views, who in particular are often wary, unsure, or skeptical of Bitcoin. Now, if you fall into that camp, this podcast is in large part here for you. But my hope is that anyone can find value and meaning in this podcast, regardless of your political views or views on Bitcoin. Now, I know there are many that may not even know what progressive is in this context. I'm speaking from a mainly US based vantage point, where a progressive refers to those on the left, generally speaking, typically Democrat or left leaning independent voters. This may translate to your home country as well if you are not from the US with your own political party names for left or right. There is not one single progressive view or type of progressive, but in general, you can expect to hear topics that progressives by and large care about, such as the environment, social justice related causes and themes, wealth inequality, global humanitarian causes, and more on this podcast. And the fact is, much of what exists in terms of Bitcoin resources, media, and podcasts tends to have a right leaning slant to messaging that can be a turnoff to those on the political left. Bitcoin is a technology, code, money. It doesn't care about the politics of any present moment, just as the US dollar can be utilized by you, me, nefarious actors, or those we completely disagree with politically. And that's just the point. Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger, censorship resistant money, accessible to anyone around the globe, separate from the state, that grows in value over time due to there only ever being 21 million Bitcoin. My hope, and the hope that many who use and advocate for Bitcoin, is that one day Bitcoin will just be. It will be ever present as sound money that does not require trust in any government or entity, as the thing that is not politicized, is not viewed as right wing, anti environment for criminals, or whatever other flavor of the day is thrown toward it. In the meantime, the name alone of this podcast suggests more work needs to be done to promote the progressive values that are inherent to Bitcoin, like those social justice and humanitarian use cases, green energy and climate change fighting use cases, and more. It takes time, and Bitcoin is still a difficult thing to understand and grasp because there's never been anything like this ever before. Bitcoin was born in the wake of the 2008 Great Financial Crisis to give power back to the people and away from banks and Wall Street, which prides itself on profit and control over people. But take your time, do your research, and check out the podcast. We'll be here. For the Bitcoin advocate that already gets it, to the skeptic who thinks it's worthless, the progressive that champions what we're about, and to the libertarian or right leaning listener who insists we, quote, don't make Bitcoin political, or that progressives couldn't possibly be interested in Bitcoin, or that it doesn't actually align with progressive values. Now, I am thankful you're here and part of this conversation wherever you land on that spectrum. Speaking of conversation, if you ever have questions, follow up, ideas for guests or topics, or anything else, please reach out and send me an email at hello@progressivebitcoiner.com. And we'll see you later on this week for our first full episode back featuring Dr. Mark Stefani and author, teacher Jason Meyer on the work of progressives in Bitcoin, their own work, and the path forward. See you soon.